students, we are going to talk about the physiology of electrocardiogram today according to the NMC competency number 5.4 and 5.5. So in this session, your learning objectives are that you should be able to describe the conduction of impulse in the heart. You should be able to describe the method for recording ECG and describe the components of the normal electrocardiogram and describe the physiological basis of each component of the electrocardiogram. So as a first objective is to study the conduction of the cardiac impulse. Let's begin. So you all know that the pacemaker in the heart is the SA node, which is situated in the right atrium. Then we have the AV node. The SA node is connected to the AV node through three internodal branches. The internodal branch of Bachmann, the internodal branch of Wenckebach, and the internodal branch of Thorel. From the AV node, a common bundle of His arises. It divides into the right bundle branch and the left bundle branch, which then continues as the Purkinje fibers, which supply the ventricular muscle fibers. So let's revisit it. The SA node sends the impulses to the AV node through three internodal branches. Then from AV node, the bundle of His arises, which is a common bundle, and then it divides into two branches, the right and the left bundle branches, which then terminates as the Purkinje fibers, and they supply the ventricular muscles. The point to be noted here is that the atrial muscles does not directly communicate with the ventricular muscle. The only way to communicate the electrical impulses is through this conducting system. Hence, we can say that the atrial muscle is quite separated from the ventricular muscle. But the presence of gap junctions in the cells of the atria and between the various muscle cells of the ventricles make them into two syncytiums. We call this as the atrial syncytium. Syncytium matlab one common mass of the protoplasm. So if one muscle cell in the atria is stimulated, the impulse, it spreads rapidly across the entire bulk of the muscle. Similarly, this becomes the ventricular syncytium. But the atria does not communicate with the ventricles directly. It has even been thought that there is a fibrous skeleton in between the atrial syncytium and the ventricular syncytium separating the two muscle masses. As we know that the electrical impulse is generated by the SA node, so this means the first part to get depolarized should be the atria. So now let's see how this impulse spreads in the cardiac muscle and how it results in the genesis of the various ECG waves. So now when the impulse is generated by the SA node, it travels to the AV node through its three bundle branches. But it being an atrial syncytium, the impulse spreads in the atria from the right atrium to the left atrium, depolarizing the entire ventricle. So during the spread of impulse, we all can see that the current is moving from the SA node to the atria. So now if I have to find out the vector, the resultant vector of the atrial depolarization, it follows this direction. So keep into the mind the instantaneous vector for each time the current flows in the heart. So when the atria are getting depolarized, the flow of current happens in this direction. Please remember this direction because this is the direction of the mean cardiac axis. So you should always remember the direction of mean cardiac axis, which is 59 degrees. So every time your instantaneous vector is in direction of mean cardiac axis, you are going to record a positive wave, right? So here for P wave, we have recorded this direction of the instantaneous vector. Now that when the impulse has reached the AV node, this results in the depolarization of the AV node. So once the AV node is depolarized, the conduction is then, the impulse is then sent to the bundle of His. Enlarging the view of the interventricular septum. So this is where the AV node is situated. So we are just giving an enlarged view of the interventricular septum here. This is the AV node and this forms the interventricular septum. So the first part to get depolarized is the left side of the interventricular septum. This results in this direction of the instantaneous vector, which is not in the direction of the mean cardiac axis. The point to be noted here is that the magnitude of this vector is small and it is in the direction away from the mean cardiac axis. Now, moving to the further depolarization, then the entire, now moving on to the further wave of depolarization, the entire interventricular septum, it gets depolarized. The entire interventricular septum gets depolarized and it also leads to the depolarization of the ventricular muscles. So the wave of depolarization, it spreads in the ventricles, it spreads across the entire ventricle slowly, and this happens very quickly. So as you can see, the entire ventricle is depolarized. Now we are left with just the tip of the apex and some portion in this direction. Then the tip of the ventricular apex is also depolarized. So the last part to get depolarized is the posterobasal part of the left ventricle. So if you get a question that what is the first part to get depolarized in the ventricle, so that would be the left side of the interventricular septum. The last part to get depolarized is posterobasal part of the left ventricle. So now, once the entire muscle mass is So once the entire muscle mass is depolarized, the resultant vector is a very strong vector in the direction of mean cardiac axis. So when only the posterobasal part is left and the entire heart otherwise is depolarized, so you have only this part left, then again you are going to get the instantaneous vector looking upwards in this direction, which is away from the mean cardiac axis. And then when the repolarization begins, the first part to get repolarized is the apex. The first part to get repolarized is the apex, and hence slowly and slowly the entire ventricle, it gets repolarized, and the wave of repolarization is the T wave. The wave of repolarization is the T wave, again facing in the direction of the mean cardiac axis. So what does all this jargon tell you? If we have the instantaneous vector of the P wave, Q wave, R wave, S wave and T wave, if we try to put them together, this means that the waves which are in the direction of the mean cardiac axis, they will be recorded as the positive deflection, and the waves which are looking away from the mean cardiac axis, they would be recorded as the negative waves. Now, why does the current always flow in this direction, and why do you get a vector like this? The reason behind this again lies in your class where you had talked about the charges. That means going back to your physics class. So you have learned that there are two types of charges, the positive charge and the negative charge. And together, if we keep them, they make a dipole. So here also the heart makes a dipole. So when the SA node is depolarized, it is positive as compared to the portion which is polarized. And then when the atrial muscle, it begins to get discharged, it forms a dipole. Similarly, when the impulse spreads, so when the wave of depolarization spreads, it is the positive charge which is spreading, where the rest of the muscle which is not depolarized is having the negative charge. So it has created a dipole with, let's use another color here to show the dipole movements of the flux. So this is the electrical flux which actually is created, and the mean resultant vector comes out in the direction of mean cardiac axis, which is 59 degrees. So that is how the mean cardiac axis had been calculated, because the heart here has been acting as a dipole. So now let's see how these waves P, Q, R, S and T, they are recorded if we record them on the paper. Since ECG is a biphasic potential, that means it is recorded from the surface of the body. So this means when we begin to record, you are going to get an isoelectric lines. That means there is no potential difference between both the electrodes. So now let's see what happens in the atria when the SA node sends the impulse to the AV node. This is the SA node, this is the AV node, this is the right atrium, this is the left atrium showing the interatrial septum. Now, when the impulse begins from the SA node, it spreads across the entire right atrium and then it is transmitted to the left atrium. So now, and we have seen the instantaneous vector of atrial depolarization is in the direction of the mean cardiac axis. So hence it is going to give us a positive deflection on the recording. So the height of the P wave, it tells us about the conduction of the impulse in the right atrium, whereas the duration of the P wave, it tells us about the time it takes to spread to the left atrium. Hence, we get a positive upward deflection in the isoelectric line while the atria are getting depolarized. So, drawing the mean cardiac. So, this is the instantaneous vector for the P wave. So, what will happen if the atria are repolarized? During the atrial repolarization, it begins from the left atrium and it goes back towards the right atrium. So, this vector is quite opposite to the mean cardiac axis. So, the atrial wave of repolarization is going to be a negative wave. But in a normal ECG, we do not see this wave because at the time when the atria are getting repolarized, at the same time the ventricles are getting depolarized because the ventricular mass is much more as compared to the atrial mass. So this wave of atrial repolarization gets buried in the ventricular depolarization or the QRS complex. Now moving on to the ventricular excitation or the depolarization. So we have drawn the ventricle here, and as I have told you, the first part to get depolarized in the ventricle is the left side of the interventricular septum. So this portion becomes positive as compared to the rest of the ventricle, which is negatively charged, and hence our resultant vector is away from the mean cardiac axis. I hope the things would be more clear now. This is our mean cardiac axis at 59 degrees. So now, when the impulse is traveling from the SA node to AV node, there is a small isoelectric line representing the conduction of the impulse to the AV node. And then there is a Q wave, which is a small negative deflection because of the depolarization of the interventricular septum. Then this wave of depolarization, it spreads to the entire interventricular septum. So because of this, there is increase in the voltage or the amplitude of this wave, and as more and more ventricular bulk is getting depolarized, the magnitude of this wave keeps on increasing. So at one time, the entire ventricle, it gets depolarized, leaving only the posterobasal part of the left ventricle. So in that case, it is responsible for the S wave, and then when even the posterobasal part of the left ventricle is also depolarized, when the entire ventricle is depolarized, again we get an isoelectric line. So this isoelectric line is the place when the entire ventricle is depolarized. Now, the wave of repolarization of the ventricle, it begins from the apex, and then the impulse slowly leads to the wave of repolarization, resulting in the instantaneous vector in the direction of the mean cardiac axis. So this results in the T wave, which is the wave of ventricular repolarization. So we have these waves which are, these waves which we have seen how they are generated and what is the physiological basis behind the generation of these waves. Hence, ECG is called as the electrocardiogram, which is the surface recording of the electrical charges during the cardiac cycle. Since it's a surface recording, the maximum voltage achieved is plus 3 to 4 millivolts. So in ECG, you all must keep into note that it is nothing but a voltage time graph, and we'll just see in a couple of slides that how this ECG paper is calibrated. Now, if we record the same thing directly from the cardiac muscle, the voltage which we are recording as 3 to 4 millivolts, that is going to be shown up as 110 millivolts. Do you remember the cardiac action potential, in which this voltage was as high as 110 millivolts? But when we record a QRS complex, this voltage is around 1 to 1.5 millivolts. Both of them, they may be showing the same thing, but the site of recording is different. In ECG, the site of recording is the surface of the body, whereas this plateau potential is recorded directly from the cardiac muscle. William Einthoven in 1903 was the person who actually described ECG and is now called as the father of ECG. Coming to the ECG paper, as you can see, this is a graphical paper which has some squares in it. If you just clearly see, there are some large squares and there are some small squares. So each of these squares, it is nothing but a graph showing the voltage and time. So coming to the scale on which this voltage is recorded. So two large boxes, they will make 1 millivolt. So two large squares, they will make 1 millivolt of the amplitude, right? And 5 large squares, they make the time 1 second, and this calibration of time holds true if our paper speed is at 25 mm per second. So now how do we record ECG? As I have told you, it is a surface recording. So there are electrodes which are the flat discs. They are connected with a wire, and together 2 electrodes and 1 wire, they make a lead. Depending on the type of electrodes used, we classify the leads as the bipolar leads or the unipolar leads. The bipolar leads are the one which has 2 active electrodes, 1 positive electrode and 1 negative electrode. In a unipolar lead, we have only 1 active electrode and 1 indifferent electrode. From indifferent, we mean that this electrode is at 0 potential. So we have 3 bipolar leads, lead 1, 2 and 3. We have 3 unipolar leads. We call them as augmented limb leads, augmented AVL, AVR and AVF, and we have 6 chest leads from V1 to V6. Please note, we are just going to talk about a standard 12 lead ECG. Before we proceed with the ECG recording, we must know about the Einthoven's triangle, which says that if we connect the right acromion, left acromion and the pubic symphysis, it makes an equilateral triangle where the heart lies in the center of the triangle. So based on this triangle, he gave a law that if we know the magnitude of any 2 leads, maybe lead 1 or 2 or 3 or any of these 2 leads, we can mathematically derive the magnitude of the 3rd lead. So in other words, we can say that the sum of lead 1, 2 and 3 is equal to 0. So this changes the definition of the lead. Till now we were thinking that 2 electrodes connected to the wire is a lead. That is the physical form of the lead. But when you get the recording on paper, that is the electrical picture of the heart between two electrodes. And when you get that recording in your hand, you call that also a lead. So coming back to the lead 1, 2 and 3. So let's put our concept of the Einthoven's triangle here. We have right arm, we have left arm, and we have pubic symphysis, but we commonly use the term left foot. Lead 1 is recorded between right arm and left arm, and the direction of the arrow is from right arm to left arm. So let's plot it on the hexagon. What is the direction of this arrow if we have to talk about it mathematically? Isn't it in the direction of 0 degrees? Right? So lead 2 is recorded between right arm and left foot. The direction is 60 degrees. And lead 3 is recorded between left arm and left foot. The direction is 120 degrees. So this is plotted on the hexagonal system. And not to forget, the heart is placed here in the center of this triangle. Since it is a bipolar lead, so both the electrodes are active here. In lead 1, right arm is a negative pole and left arm is the positive pole. For lead 2, right arm is the negative pole and the foot is the positive pole. For lead 3, left arm is the negative pole and left foot is the positive pole. So again, we begin with our Einthoven's triangle for representing the augmented limb leads. So here in the AVR, the active electrode is recorded at the right arm, whereas the other two electrodes, they are joined with a resistance to create the indifferent electrode at 0 potential. So the active electrode being at right arm, the direction of the augmented limb lead of AVR is in this direction, which is opposite to the mean cardiac axis. Now going back to the hexagon system again, lead 1, lead 1, lead 2 and lead 3. Let's revise the angles 0, 60, 120. AVR is exactly opposite to the mean cardiac axis. So let's draw the mean cardiac axis here, which is 59 degrees. So this is your mean cardiac axis. Now moving on to the next lead, the AVL. The active electrode in AVL is on the left arm and the other two electrodes, they are joined with the resistance to make the indifferent electrode. Hence, the direction of the active electrode is towards the left arm. So this would be minus 30 AVL. Similarly, for the AVF, the active electrode is on the left foot and the other two electrodes are joined to form the indifferent electrodes. So in AVF, the active electrode is towards the left foot and the indifferent electrodes are formed by joining the two other poles and creating the indifferent electrode at 0 potential. So accordingly, the direction of AVF is at plus 90 degrees. So this is called as the hexagon system on which we record the magnitude and direction of the various leads. And this is required for the calculation of the mean cardiac axis in the given ECG. So, we just required the standard bipolar leads for the calculation of the mean cardiac axis, that is what we are going to talk about in our next session, where we'll be talking about the analysis of ECG. Coming over to the chest leads, there are 6 chest leads, V1 to V6, out of which V1 and V2, they are called as the right-sided chest leads, V3, V4. So V1 and V2, since they are looking into the right ventricle, they are called as the right-sided leads. The leads which are looking at the inferior border of the heart, they are called as the inferior chest leads, V3 and V4. And the leads which are looking onto the left ventricle, they are called as the left-sided chest leads. For recording the ECG, we ask the patient to lie down comfortably on a couch, taking care that he is not wearing anything metallic on his body, because we are going to record the electrical current. And we rub the jelly over the limbs and we attach the electrodes on the wrists and the ankles. But we had discussed that the Einthoven triangle is on the acromion. Then why do we put the electrode on the limbs? Actually, our body is acting as a volume conductor. So it doesn't matter whether you put the electrode here or here, it is going to record the same thing. And why do we put the jelly? Because jelly has some silica particles in it. So when we rub the jelly, it increases the conductivity of the skin and it enhances the procurement of the electrical signal. And then once we are connected with the machine, we do a calibration of 1 millivolt so that our machine tells us what 1 millivolt of the potential reads for us. And then we record all the 12 leads. Now coming to the 6 standard leads and 6 chest leads, we have to connect all the 4 limbs for recording the 6 standard leads. But we had talked about the triangle, then why do we connect the 4th limb? So it acts as the ground. Coming to the 6 chest leads, so we find the angle of Lewis here. This is the projection which you can feel, the elevation you can feel here. This is the angle of Lewis and it corresponds to the 2nd intercostal space. And then from there you count the 4th intercostal space, 2.5 centimeters to the right of sternum, you place your first electrode. 2.5 centimeters to the right of sternum, you place your second electrode. And then in the middle of the clavicle, you draw a line down there, and in the 5th intercostal space, you place your 4th electrode, 4th chest lead, and in between these two, V2 and V4, we place V3, and then we take the axilla and we draw the anterior axillary line. In the 5th intercostal space, we place the 5th chest lead, and in the mid-axillary line in the 5th intercostal space, we place the 6th chest lead. So that is the placement of the chest leads. It is a very, very important thing which you must remember for your practicals throughout your clinical career and even for your exams. So now once we have done the components of normal ECG, we are going to discuss these components in detail. So the first thing which we must remember that it has the deflections from the baseline, some positive deflections and some negative deflections. So these deflections from the baseline or from the isoelectric line are called as waves. We have the P wave, Q wave, R wave, S wave and T wave. In some patients, we can even record the potential from the papillary muscles as the U wave. But this is not a very constant feature. And as I have already told you that these waves are nothing but a graph between the voltage and time. So the voltage of the P wave is 0.2 millivolt and it takes nearly 0.08 to 0.1 seconds to complete. Hence it gives us the magnitude and duration of the P wave. Moving on to the QRS complex, which tells us about the depolarization of the ventricles. It takes 0.08 to 0.12 seconds to complete. So that makes the duration of the QRS complex, and the magnitude is 1 to 1.5 millivolts. So this is the wave which has the highest magnitude in the entire ECG. Coming to the T wave, as you can see, the ventricular mass is more as compared to the atrial mass. So its magnitude is almost double the P wave. For P wave it is 0.2 and for T wave it is 0.5. So when you draw a T wave, make sure you draw double the height and double the duration of the P wave, because it is for the ventricular muscle, and even the duration of the T wave is 0.27 seconds. The duration and the magnitude of the U wave is 0.2 millivolts, same as the P wave, with a duration of 0.08 seconds, same as the P wave. The next component of the ECG are intervals. So intervals are nothing. They are the durations on the isoelectric line which includes the waves. So here we have the PR interval which includes the P wave here. It denotes the time taken by the impulse to spread from SA node to AV node. So it tells us about the AV conduction time. Its duration is 0.12 to 2 seconds. Next is the RR interval. It is the distance between two R waves, and it is a very important interval clinically because it tells us the heart rate, and it also denotes that it is the time taken by one cardiac cycle to complete. So hence we can find out the heart rate by dividing 1500 with RR interval in millimeters, provided the paper speed is at 25 millimeters per second. So this formula holds true at a paper speed of 25 millimeters per second. So when do you use this? You will use it in your clinics, you will use it in your lab, and you will also need it for finding out certain ECG related questions in your NEET PG or the next exams. The next interval is the QT interval. It begins from the Q wave and it ends at the end of the T wave. This talks about the entire ventricular depolarization and repolarization. So its duration is 0.40 to 0.43 seconds. The next is the ST interval from the beginning of the S wave to the end of the T wave. It denotes the time taken by the ventricles to repolarize. The next component of the ECG is the segments. Now, the difference in the intervals and segment is that in segments, we just take into account the isoelectric lines. We do not include the waves in it, whereas in the intervals, we had been including the waves. The various segments are PQ segment or PR segment, we can call it anything. The duration of PR segment is 0.04 to 0.08 seconds. It purely denotes the time of conduction from SA node to AV node. The next segment is the ST segment. Its duration is same as the PR segment. Now this segment is clinically very important because this is the point when the entire heart has depolarized and there is no flow of current happening in the myocardium. So, just think of a scenario when the entire heart is depolarized, but there is some injury in this part of the heart. So, the entire heart being depolarized, this particular part is not depolarized. What will it lead to if this part is injured? So, this is going to result in the current of injury, and it is going to affect the ST segment. That is what is seen in the patients of myocardial infarction, resulting in the ST segment elevation. So, this is the physiological basis of ST segment elevation in the patient of myocardial infarction. You do remember this for your MCQs or your Viva questions. The next is the TP segment. This portion of the heart denotes the time when the entire heart is polarized without any electrical activity. Here you can see the atria had already repolarized. The ventricles have also now been repolarized. The entire heart is relaxing in the polarized state, right? And its duration is 0.2 seconds if the heartbeat is at around 75 beats per minute. I definitely want to add one thing here, that whatever we are talking here, the P wave is atrial depolarization, the QRS complex is ventricular depolarization, and T wave is ventricular repolarization. Please do not confuse it with the systole or diastole. Systole and diastole are contraction and relaxation. That is the mechanical event. All this we are talking about is the electrical change. So whenever you are asked about the P wave, say depolarization of atria. Whenever you are asked about QRS complex, say depolarization of the ventricles. T wave, repolarization of the ventricles. So we have seen that the ST segment holds a very important place in diagnosing the myocardial infarction. But then how do you know that the ST segment is elevated? For that, we have yet another thing, we call it as J point. So now, this J point is the point where the S segment meets. This is where the ST segment just begins, or the S wave ends on the ST segment. It lies on the isoelectric line. If this J point is raised above the isoelectric line, we say that the ST segment is elevated. So in a normal ECG, all the characteristics recorded in lead 1, 2 and 3 are same. That means we have a positive P wave. We don't record any Q wave in lead 1, 2, 3. We have a R wave, we have an S wave, and we have a T wave. So this kind of recording is seen in lead 1, 2, 3. Remember, the Q wave is absent in lead 1, 2 and 3. It is not recorded there. The voltage of lead 2 is maximum. Can you tell me the reason? Can you think of a reason why the voltage of lead 2 is maximum? What is the direction of lead 2? 60 degrees. What is the direction of mean cardiac axis? 59 degrees, which is very close to the mean cardiac axis. Hence, the voltage of lead 2 is highest. For all analytical purposes, the calculations are done on lead 2. So what is the significance of these leads? They are used for the diagnosing of the cardiac axis, diagnosis of the cardiac arrhythmias, and for studying the functional abnormalities of the heart. So we have just seen the lead 1, 2, 3, moving on to the lead AVL, AVR and AVF. Now this is very beautiful here. We had seen that this was lead 1, 2, 3. The AVR was exactly opposite to the mean cardiac axis. So the AVR lead is recorded with an inverted P, no Q, inverted R and an inverted T wave. This is also called as an inverted lead. So If you see an inverted AVR, that is very normal. It occurs because it is in its direction, its instantaneous vector is opposite to the mean cardiac axis. The AVL on the other hand, so let's draw the mean cardiac axis. AVL is minus 30 degrees as compared to the mean cardiac axis of 59 degrees. So hence, the P wave may be positive or negative. The Q wave is absent in all the augmented limb leads, which you must remember. The R wave may be biphasic. It can be positive, it can be negative, and the T wave is inverted. You always keep this thing in mind that the T wave is always going to follow the R wave. If the R wave is positive in a normal individual, the T wave will be positive. If the R wave is inverted in a normal individual, the T wave will also be inverted, because the R wave is inverted only because of its direction, and the T wave is going to follow that. If the R wave is straight and the T wave is inverted, that is a point of concern. Now coming to the AVF, the direction of AVF is plus 90 degree, which is almost very close to the mean cardiac axis. Hence, all the waves are positive, the positive P, R and T wave. Again, the Q is absent. So we have seen that in lead 1, 2, 3, AVR, AVL, AVF, the Q wave had been absent. So let's quickly look at the ECGs of lead 1, 2, 3, AVR, AVL, AVF. I'm going to just redraw this. So this is lead 1, a positive P wave and a positive QRS complex and a positive T wave. The voltage of lead 2 is highest. So this is lead 3. You can see the AVR, a negative P wave, negative R and a negative T wave. The AVL here shows a biphasic. The AVR here shows a biphasic reaction with an inverted T, and the AVF shows a positive P, a biphasic R and a positive T. So now what is the significance of augmented limb leads? To find out the position of heart and confirming the ventricular damage. Why do we call these leads as augmented leads? They are called as augmented leads because they augment the signal by 50%. So this may be even asked in your MCQs, that they augment the signal by 50%. So now let's see what happens in the chest leads. So the P wave is positive in all the chest leads and the Q wave is absent in V1, V2, V3. It is present only in V4, V5, V6. Till now we have seen that Q wave is absent in almost all the leads. But point to be remembered here is that it is present only in V4, V5 and V6 in normal circumstances. The R wave and the S wave, it follows a very particular relationship as we proceed from V1 to V6. So as we proceed from V1 to V6, the magnitude of R wave, increases and the magnitude of S wave decreases as we move from V1 to V6. We will see in the coming slide that how it happens. And the T wave, it is upright if the R is larger and it is negative if the S is larger. Right? So T wave is always in the direction of the QRS complex. So let's see this RS pattern. So this is also called as the RS pattern or QRS pattern. So in V1, you get a small R and a big S wave. In V2, the R wave increases, the S wave decreases slightly. In V3, it almost becomes same. In V4, you get a small Q wave, an R wave and a small S wave. In V5, you have a Q wave, big R, a small S. And in V6, there is a Q wave, big bold R and a small S wave. So this pattern is very consistently seen in all the chest leads. R wave denotes the left ventricular activity and the S wave denotes the right ventricular activity. So let's see this phenomenon in this slides. So this is the R wave, the deep S in V1. In V2, the R increases, the S is still there with a positive T here, and we have an equivocal biphasic R and S. Here in V4, the R has increased, the S is almost gone. Similarly in V5 and V6. Though we have discussed a very stringent behavior, but it doesn't happen so in the clinical conditions. You might observe certain variations in the recordings because not all the human beings have the exactly same body structure and the physiology. There would be slight variations which would be there from person to person, resulting in slight variations even in the recording of these waves. Now, what are the significance of the chest leads? It helps us in localizing the recent and old ventricular damage. It helps in diagnosing bundle branch block and ventricular hypertrophy. The details of all these things would be taken up by the medicine department. It is currently beyond the scope of physiology to discuss all these changes in detail. So when you have an record of ECG in your hand, what should be looking at? So you have this paper in your hand. The first thing, you just quickly observe whether it looks like a regular normal rhythm or not. And then you calculate the RR interval and you calculate the heart rate. And then you see the pattern of waves in each of these leads, that whether the pattern is normal or there is some reversal or some abnormality in that. Then you try to calculate the duration and magnitude of the waves from lead 2. You determine the interval, you determine the segment, and after that you determine the mean cardiac axis. This is what we do for a study of a normal ECG. Beyond this, we can also calculate the various aspects, like for the atrial hypertrophy, for the ventricular hypertrophy, etc. Hence, to summarize, we have seen the conduction of the impulse in the heart. We have seen the physiological basis of genesis of the various ECG waves, intervals and segments. And we have also studied how to record a normal ECG and then how to analyze it. I hope you had a good learning session. Thank you.